Hello, everybody. You're listening to the Big Chill Podcast. This is episode 332, talking docks and jocks with Nathan Horrocks. Hello, Big Chillians, and welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast. I'm Frank, joined as always with Sam and Eddie. And today we have a really nice interview at the end of this with Nathan Horrocks. Unfortunately, Sam was unable to attend the interview, so it's just Eddie and myself. But Sam, I will say, I did not let Eddie get off the hook. We now have someone to produce a video of Eddie trying to get over the Grand National fences in the most pristine video possible.
Oh, we've got some jockey cam for that.
No, we wouldn't need jockey cam for that. I think we would need wider camera angles.
You're putting a jockey cam helmet on.
The jockey cam wouldn't.
And we're getting all the different video.
The jockey cam footage would be me slowly jogging around Aintree and then trying to climb over fences. It wouldn't be particularly fascinating.
Just any video is going to be funny. But the fact that we're going to have a nice high-end production quality to it, it's going to go viral. No problem.
But yeah, Sam, big weekend for you, making your return to major sporting events. Although I say that, you went to the Euros. Oh, no, you went to the...
This guy's been to more sporting events in the past year than I've been
I've actually done pretty well.
It is
so
true,
what have I done?
actually.
The Carabao Cup semi-final.
FA Cup.
No, sorry, FA Cup semi-final, Carabao Cup final.
He was going to do the King George.
Yeah, you did.
I was going to do the King George.
Yeah, but that had no friends.
Yeah, but I had zero friends. And now have done... and still don't have friends.
Yeah. And you did the Arc.
Did the Arc
and
with Eddie.
Forgot about that.
And then with Jake, went to the friend of the podcast, went to the Dolphins Jags at Spurs Stadium, which is a really nice stadium, by the way.
I really want to go see this stadium.
So first, I'm always interested to know. I've been to the London games, I think 3 times. Obviously, not only was this your first trip to the London games, this is your first ever NFL experience. It's a unique way to watch the games in the sense that you have this crowd coming who aren't necessarily that interested in either of the teams involved, and it's a kind of celebration of the sport more than it is actually feels like a competitive game at times. But I'd just be interested to know your quick takeaways. What was different from actually being at a live game than you thought it was going to be? What was better? What was worse? Would you really want to go back, or do you think the viewing experience at home beats the in-stadium experience?
I think one thing you miss is that kind of like tactical oversight of the whole scenario. Like you can kind of see where people are moving. You can kind of see like where they are. Like the camera for a TV is just much better placed, right? But what I really liked about it was I thought we were going to be quite low, and the stadium's fairly steep, so actually you kind of get more even though you're lower down. And it's amazing kind of how much more you see the coverage away from the main TV camera, if that makes sense. So you see what the secondary's doing, you see what the safeties are doing, you see how they're set up kind of away from the line of scrimmage. So it was quite interesting watching them like kind of dynamically trying to get around each other's secondary, trying to make the plays and all that. So that was kind of a cool part of it. Some reason I was picking up fouls better in person than I was on the like watching it on TV. Yeah, penalties, I was picking up like false starts and stuff like that. So that was kind of, I don't know why. Maybe you're just so zoned into it. Whereas maybe with TV, you kind of like, you're distracted, you don't really care, like, because you're just going to hear the referee say it eventually, or the officials. But I really enjoyed it. One of the things I thought I was going to be worried about was the pauses between like the change it from like special teams, or like the change of downs, or like just they
the TV
punted
timeouts.
And then the new, and I didn't really care for them. It was kind of like they just kind of distracted the crowd with, trying to get people chanting.
What do you mean you didn't really care?
I thought well, no, I thought I was going to be more annoyed at the delays.
They didn't bother you.
Yeah, it didn't bother me as much. Yeah. So all in all, I thought it was great. I think it helped that I got a game out of it, right? Because there was one point in this game where like the Dolphins were up by 10. The Jags were kind of doing nothing on offense as well. And I think the Dolphins then got the ball back but got stopped. Yeah, it was good to get a game out of it. It was good to get a field goal. I don't know if you saw it on the TV, like how much the ball kind of curved in for one of the Jags field goals.
The game tying one to send it to overtime. Yeah. That thing was 4 feet wide of the post and curved back in. That was insane.
And it slotted like perfectly into the bottom right corner of it as well. It was insane. It was like a Roberto Carlos style free kick of the NFL world.
I've never seen an NFL kick do that before. Not that much. Like that was crazy. But yeah, you got to see a game-winning overtime field goal, right? Or not overtime, sorry, end of regulation field goal.
Yeah,
end of regulation, cool. Yeah. And also, you got to see the Jags snap the second longest losing streak in NFL history.
You got to see the Jags win a game. No one's done that in 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is it? Week one last season, right? Was the last time they won. But it was cool watching how like emotional they got with that win. And maybe, that's the kind of thing that the Jags will kind of feel a bit more at home with London, right? When those kind of things happen, you kind of maybe associate London with, good things. And I don't know. Like, there's the inevitability that they think this is the franchise coming to Europe, right? But
well, maybe. I mean, it's not going to be Green Bay, is it? But look, I think the only way the idea of Jacksonville moving, obviously the pandemic makes it impossible for that to even be considered, but they have to become better because you need to get local interest into a greater degree. It's very hard to convince people, wow, this is so exciting. The worst team in the NFL is about to move to London. Than I do. And I think it's kind of sad to say I'm just part of that sort of red zone generation where I want all of the updates all the time. And I like flicking between games and maybe having 1 or 2 games on that I'm focusing on, but everything else at the same time. It would be hard to convince me to go and watch an NFL game in stadium every week.
No, for sure. I think for viewing and watching, TV is definitely better. If you want to experience not so much the game, but the whole atmosphere, like I wouldn't go to a game of, I don't know, Cincinnati versus Detroit. That would not interest me at all.
Or say the Jags against
the Dolphins, yes. But if it were the Giants, or a team that was good that I was rooting for, then it's fun because you get part of that experience of kind of being in the moment where your team has a big win or, you see them come from behind and it's memorable. But yeah, there wouldn't be much memorable about Pittsburgh Seahawks, even though that went to overtime. That is not a game I would have enjoyed going to. It's not even a game I enjoyed watching.
Well, some of us had the Steelers as a survivor pick, and we live on to fight another week. You told me not to do it, Frank. I did it. I got through, maybe a little lucky.
You just got through. It even came to the point, so I actually explained to Carissa, my girlfriend, what a survivor pool is because she had no idea. Because I was trying to explain like why I'm watching this terrible game on Sunday night, and then when it was going to overtime, she asked a really good question, which was, "What happens if it ends in a tie?" And I was like, "I think he loses."
No, so my league has specific rules if it ends in a tie. So if it ends in a tie, you have to make 2 selections the following
that's so
week,
stupid.
And both have to win.
Survivor is you have to pick a team to win, not to tie, not to lose, to win.
I think I would argue you picking a team not to lose. I think it's more the argument, but I probably got away with it a little bit on the Survivor. Now, here's the one thing I got to ask you, and this is a genuine question because obviously you didn't want me to pick the Steelers. You hate the Steelers.
I don't hate the Steelers. I hate that people
do.
think they're a good team because they're not a good team.
Okay. All right. What percentage of you wanted the Seahawks to win just so you could tell me I told you so?
Oh, a decent amount. I didn't want, no, this was a win-win situation for me because Steelers win, you win your survivor, you keep going. Steelers lose, then I get to give you the I told you so up and down this podcast. I had a speech written, I had like 3 pages typed out, like we were ready to go when that hit overtime. But unfortunately, Geno Smith is exactly what we thought he was, and that is not a game time winner, unfortunately. And we talked about this off air, but watching him in the turf with just his hands on his helmet, just in disbelief as to what he had done and given up that game, I felt so sorry for him as a professional backup. And you could just tell that was his, like, this is why I'm not a starting QB. Why can't I just not do this? I felt terrible.
No, I mean, it's there's elements of the discussion we're going to have later on with Nathan, right, in the interview, and the sort of mental health side of the sport, and that these are real people doing real things, and it's their real lives with implications for their whole futures and contracts that they'll sign and opportunities that they'll get further down the line. And I agree with you. You see that scene of him just on the ground taking a solid, I don't know, 15 seconds of just staring into the grass, which is a long time with no teammate approaching him and just him lost in clearly his own not very happy thoughts. And you couldn't help but feel sorry for him. I mean, just someone processing that this is maybe the last big opportunity. I mean, he's going to get up until around Thanksgiving, right? But between now and then, he has to do something pretty special in order to change the perception surrounding his level of play. And that, as the first start, was not the best way to do that.
And he played a decent game, not a great game, but the first half stagnant, but that second half he came to life and he had a few nice drives down the field. Looked like he finally got into a rhythm, and you thought, maybe he's gonna keep it turned on here and pull one out. And then unfortunate fumble, and the Steelers survived, and so does Eddie.
So obviously it was a week of blowouts and thrilling endings. Kind of the games went one way or the other. Either the game was done and dusted with 7 minutes to go, or the game was decided in the final seconds or in overtime. The only exception to that being the Vikings, who managed to take a game that was done and dusted and then turn it into a thriller. Now, that was an emotional roller coaster, maybe more of an emotional roller coaster for some of us. Now looking at the standings and the records of some of these teams, and you're kind of getting towards, I mean, we're a third of the way through the season now. So you start to feel as if teams are showing their true selves one way or the other. Who do you believe in? Who out of the teams that have got off to a good start do you not believe in? So I'm going to leave out the teams I think we would agree
now,
are
real
all
quick,
good.
Do you mean believe in as a sense can do like a deep playoff run or win their division? Because you have someone not like the Cowboys, but Washington or the Eagles who are 2 games back. I mean, do I believe they could win a playoff game? No. Do I believe they could win the division? Also probably not, but maybe because the division's so weak, Are these like legitimate contenders?
Okay, let's frame it as, could they win a playoff game?
Got it.
Without either the other team not having a terrible performance or a huge amount of luck. Like, I don't want to be like, conceivably, yes, they could, but
anyone can win on any given day, Eddie. That's the answer.
Exactly. I think Al Pacino told us that or something. But
on this team, we fight for those inches. We crawl with our fingertips for those inches.
Is it Richard Nixon?
It's actually, I don't think it was that bad.
Well, I'm going to encourage you to listen to that when the episode comes out. I think that was like Frank doing Richard Nixon doing Al Pacino.
That's how deep my skills are.
Yeah. It's a very specific impression.
Could you imagine going on like a late night show? Like, here's Frank. He's really good at impressions. All right, this is Bill Clinton doing Bill Cosby doing Norm Macdonald. Are we ready?
Yeah,
Okay,
go on,
hit
Frank.
me with it, Frank.
Stand and deliver.
Nail that one.
Oh, I can't. Too tough.
Bengals, Raiders, Chargers. Who is for real? Are none of them for real? Do you think all of them are capable of winning a playoff game if they get themselves into the postseason?
I think Chargers would be my top pick there, and then the Bengals, and then the Raiders. I say, first off, I think the Chargers could make a deep run. I mean, I think they're still legitimate Super Bowl contenders. The only worry there is if they run into a team that can run the ball, because their run defense is the worst in the league, and it showed. I mean, when you look at the stat line for the Ravens, it was nothing super impressive except that they just ran at will on them. You know, Lamar Jackson didn't have a great stat line, but none of the running backs in particular went off. But, you know, I think they averaged 4.5 yards. So Chargers, I think, are definite legitimate contenders. I picked the Bengals over the Raiders just because I think the Raiders were in a unique situation this week where they were playing a team that I think is not that great. And this whole John Gruden isn't going to have an effect on this team. Look at how well they did. I think that's kind of just hidden because the Broncos aren't very good. I think that will come out a little more. And I think you will start to see some issues with the team that is going to be in a little bit of a disarray in these next few weeks with the whole rearranging. You know, it's easy on a short-term fix, but I don't think on a long-term fix it's going to work. And they just don't seem that great of an all-around team. Carr's doing great, but otherwise, Carr and Ruggs, you know, well, yeah, I'm going to stick with the Bengals. I think, I don't know, something about them. I kind of like them.
I'd probably agree with Frank's kind of reasoning, basically Chargers, Bengals, and the Raiders. I think the thing with the Chargers is that, which is probably the problem with the Bengals at the moment, is that the Chargers have had a pretty difficult schedule, whereas the Bengals have had a pretty soft schedule. But so I'd feel like in the playoffs, if you're going to be playing better teams, the Chargers probably have that with them at the moment. But like Frank says, if they go up against someone with a good running game, that's a serious problem for them. With the Bengals, I think you can. I know they've had a soft schedule, but I think you can be a good team by beating bad teams well. And I think their defense is kind of pretty understated at the moment for kind of the stats it's putting up. And I think that Burrows is becoming a pretty solid QB, franchise QB. The Raiders, I don't know. There's just always this feeling, like you say, I'm a bit of a doubter, just in the way you doubt the Chargers. I just feel like something doesn't click. I don't know why. I just don't. I don't. I don't see it. I don't feel it. Again, call it a feeling, but there's just a confidence issue I have with the Raiders and the kind of.
John Gruden's going to send us another email, Sam. You should have seen what he said.
Wait, did you get the long email last time? Yeah.
Yeah, he touched every one of his normal hot topics. It was
don't worry, ESPN will get it soon because they're tapped into emails anyway.
Yeah, they can have a nice round 2 on a news report. I would say this week has made it a lot closer than it was, though, between the Bengals and Chargers. Because a couple of people have, you know, the Lions have been heartbroken recently in the last couple of games against some pretty good teams. And yeah, I think the Bengals are kind of performing at the moment. You can only beat what's in front of you, and they've beaten them pretty well. So it's a lot closer, but I'd still put the Chargers just ahead because they have beaten better opposition than the Bengals at the moment. And going into a playoff game, I kind of prefer that.
All right, I got 2 more subsets. Okay. So the next group is the 5-1 teams. Which of these 5-1 teams do you not really believe in? Because at this point, I think you've got to assume they're all making the. I think at this point we've got to assume they're all making the playoffs, barring a catastrophic collapse. Particularly as a lot of them are in divisions that are not that strong, so they actually have the luxury of not needing to do a lot from here on in, just to secure their playoff spot. So the Ravens, the Cowboys or the Packers? Frank, you've already said it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll stick with the Packers. I really like the Cowboys, and I've kind of said since week 1 when I watched them lose to Tampa Bay, I kind of thought they were a real legitimate contender for the Super Bowl. And it pains me to say that, being a Giants fan, and also just kind of knowing in general how much they seem to choke when it matters in the past decade or two now. But they look for real. I mean, their offense is so stacked. I can see them putting up 40 a game, no problem. They put up what against the Patriots? What was it? They just beat them 30, and they turned the ball over twice in the end zone and played a pretty poor game with, I think they had over 100 yards in penalties. They still put up a decent amount. So if that's the worst they play and they still can put up those numbers, I think they're legitimate. The Packers, to me, you have Aaron Rodgers, but yeah, and their defense has been hurt, so maybe if they can get some people back, they'll be better. But I just don't trust that defense, and I think if you can get in Rodgers' head a little bit and kind of get some pressure on him, he'll fold, and he'll try and do too much, and they won't come through. So, and the Ravens, I mean, I'm really impressed with Lamar Jackson this year. I think he has stepped up, and he is definitely the leader on that field and is leading them to wins. I mean, they look much better this year than they did last year. Just the overall morale and feel of their offense looks much better.
I'll agree with you. I feel like Lamar Jackson is the player. If labeling a quarterback who's previously won the MVP as a kind of most improved seems a bit dumb, but in some ways he seems to have made that legitimate step into the elite set of quarterbacks in a way that it felt sometimes before he was one-dimensional and that you weren't quite certain as to whether or not he deserved to be in that sort of exclusive list. Now, I got a question for you though, Frank. Is part of the reason why you don't believe in the Packers is it's just because Aaron Rodgers has spent his entire life owning you?
I did really enjoy that. I enjoyed it for two reasons. One, I do like how he has fun playing football. As annoying and dorky as he is, he definitely enjoys it. You know what I mean? And he understands that he's playing a game for a living and he's making millions and millions of dollars, and these people are coming to watch them, and he can just rip into them. I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. The other reason I thought it was funny that he gave him the discount double check and then the I fucking own you to all their fans is how enraged fans get, as if this is the end all be all and they're not watching a form of entertainment. I mean, I listened to the radio this morning and there was fans calling in to NFL Network just berating Aaron Rodgers, saying he's absolute trash and he'll never accomplish anything and he's not Tom Brady and he's garbage. Relax. It's a game and he's having fun, take a chill. It's just so funny to see people go off the rails off of something like that. So I actually enjoyed that. I thought that was funny.
Also, it's not like what he said was offensive, right? It would be a different thing if he had just squared up to the Bears fans and yelled, screamed profanity and insulted them. Just the fact that he just said, just the fact that he said, all my life I've owned you and I still own you.
He's 22-5 against them. And that was the best. People were like, he doesn't own us. It's he's 22-5 against the Bears. I saw it was, I think, top 3 best ever records against a single opponent for any quarterback in the history of the NFL. So he owns them more than any other QB has ever owned a team almost.
So Sam, for Frank, it's the Packers. Who is it for you that you don't quite believe in? I get your answer could be you believe in them all.
It could. But I'm with Frank. There's something about that 38-3 loss at the start of the season that I just haven't shaken off about the Packers.
Do you feel them just before you? Do you feel the same way about the Bills?
No, because there's something still a little bit awkward about the Packers. I don't know what it is like this. I don't really see them getting away from teams that well. I don't know. Again, I just don't have that feeling about them. I agree with Frank on the Cowboys, though. You just think every single time they're very, very easily going to put up 30 plus in almost any game. So if their defense does anything, they're probably going to win a game. So that's something really good going for them, and I have a lot of confidence in them for that reason. But yeah, I'm putting the Packers down there.
And the final subset then is teams with a losing record who you think would be the most dangerous if they actually manage to make the playoffs. So we've got the Niners at 2-3, the Patriots at 2-4, the Colts at 2-4, and I'll throw in. Actually, I'll leave it at those three because I actually think looking at the losing records teams, there's not a lot who I think would be that scary if they actually made it there.
The Patriots are trash. I am so sick of everyone jumping on the Patriots. Every game's been so close. They could have won all these games, but they don't. And they're getting lucky that they're staying close in these games. The Cowboys put up 600 yards of offense against the Patriots. And then people have the audacity to say Patriots have a top defense in the NFL.
The audacity. The audacity.
How
oh, my
dare
word.
They?
Were you calling into NFL Network this morning?
No, but this was another caller.
Rodgers is trash. And this is audacious.
People still think they have a top defense just because it's Belichick. Their defense is trash. It's not good.
I don't know if it's trash.
It's not great.
It's maybe not.
Both
elite.
of them aren't great, right? And their offense as well. They're not posting big yards or big points in almost any game.
They're mediocre, probably. Now, but here's my question for you, Frank. A little bit. You said with the Cowboys, you feel as if they get in their own way at times, but when they don't, they look great. Isn't that kind of a cause for concern? That if you're going to be sloppy, if you're going to have dumb turnovers, and if you're going to give away bad penalties, that against good teams, you're not going to get away with those mistakes. So against the Patriots allowed them.
I mean,
now here's one question I have for you, Frank. Not that we're going to go into too much detail in the individual games. Should Bourne have just gone down at the 1 yard line and eked out some more of the clock and assume that the Patriots are going to be able to punch it in?
Yes, I thought that. So what Eddie's referring to is the Patriots were up, and then Mac Jones threw a pick six to Trayvon Diggs, who is an absolute animal, and scored a touchdown. And then they went up. The Cowboys went up, and then the ensuing drive, the first play of the drive, Mac Jones throws a 65, right? 75 yard
Something
touchdown
like that,
pass.
Yeah.
When he caught it and he was running down, I thought he's going to stop at the 1 and they're going to run the clock out. And I was ready to just throw my remote through the TV. But when I saw him run into the end zone, I was genuinely happy that he ran into the end zone, because as soon as he hit in, I looked at the clock and I said, oh, there's still tons of time left for Prescott to drive down the field and at least tie this game up. It was not the right move. I get it.
It's a hindsight thing, right?
I don't know if it is, because that you have to believe that is something Bill Belichick would teach. We've talked before about some of the intricacies of Belichick's coaching, like the never reach for a pylon. He's one of the only coaches that super instills that you never reach for a pylon, because guess what? You could fumble at the goal line just like Dak Prescott did, although it wasn't for the pylon. But he has those things that he really teaches, and I have to imagine that's one of them. Like if you're going to score with a minute left, don't score, stop, and let's run the clock out.
Well, so it was the other side of the 2-minute warning. So they could probably, in the end, the Cowboys got the ball back with 2 minutes and 11 seconds left. I guess you could have. I think they had 2 timeouts. I think when they had their final, because the Cowboys even kind of like messed it up when they ended up being just short on that long play that set up the game-tying field goal, where I think they thought they had the first down, so they thought they were going to be able to just clock it and have a couple of attempts at the end zone and then ended up having to sort of rush on to call the timeout and get the field goal up. How much of an impact would it have changed? So maybe you're talking about they get the ball back with 1:45 instead of 2:11. It probably doesn't have a massive swing on what happens, but yeah, it's just one of those things where you never know. But anyway, back to the original question. So you've dismissed the Patriots. Would you be worried about playing the Niners? Would you be worried about playing the Colts?
I'll be quick, and then Sam can jump in. I'm always worried about playing the Niners. Just something about they can scheme really well. I think they have the best coaching staff in the National Football League. So there's always a worry that they can put together a good game. I'm not super worried about Jimmy G or Trey Lance at this point. So I think offensively, I'm not super worried. The Colts, I picked the Colts to make the playoffs, and I watched them. I think they're a pretty good team, especially they just need to figure out who they are a little more. Jonathan Taylor is tearing it up at running back right now, and he's still not even getting 20 carries a game yet. So I think as the season goes on, he's going to get a bigger workload, and I think that's going to help them out and take some of that pressure off Carson Wentz. And they're going to be one of those – they're kind of going to have like a Titans offense where they're super well-rounded and they have a quarterback who can throw really well, but they can also kind of rely on that run game to just set the tone. So they definitely scare me if they can make it in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Colts are actually starting to identify more as a bit of a big play team as well. I was looking at because the last 3 or 4 games have actually performed really well. But when you look in the last 2 games, they've had a 42-yard play, 51, 52, 76, and 83. And in my head, I just think that, like Frank, you're right about the fact that the identity thing for the Colts is there. But I think Wentz is starting to play well. They're starting to understand what to do against teams and maybe where they're good. And I think that if they keep going on that curve, then I'd be probably more, at the moment, I'd be more concerned about the Colts than the Niners. So I'd probably go Colts, Niners, Patriots in that respect.
I think the Niners' playoff hopes are looking pretty slim at the moment because just with the start the Cardinals have had, and then I think the Rams are the best team in that division, even if the Cardinals are the only unbeaten team in the NFL. And so it's hard to see the Rams slowing down and losing that many games. The Cardinals obviously have a pretty decent lead over the Niners at this point. So,
Eddie, let me give you this. I'll give you a question then. Can you
fire away?
Rank these teams: Cards, Bills, Rams, Packers, Cowboys, Ravens. So those are the teams that have now kind of made their way to the top so far.
I still think the Rams might be the best team in the NFL. So I think I'd put the Rams
even after losing to the Cards.
Even after losing to the Cards. I think I'd put the Bills 2, but then let's see what happens to them tonight as well, because it's an interesting test against a decent Titans team.
Oh, I forgot the Bucks.
That knows what they're good at.
Bucks are one of those, right?
And the Bucks still wouldn't have figured. Yeah, Bucks wouldn't have figured yet in my list.
Okay, Rams, Bills. Who's your third? Cards, Packers, Cowboys, Ravens, Bucks.
So I'll put the Packers at the bottom of that list.
Good call.
I'm gonna put the Bucks second last on that list.
Okay.
Because even though I think I'm torn because I haven't been super impressed by them so far in the regular season, but then I wasn't impressed by them last year in the regular season, and you just know that they have so much experience there that if they are healthy going into the postseason, that they will be as hard to beat as anyone else. But I still don't love what I see from them. They seem to have dropped off a little defensively, and you just fear that age will sort of become a factor at some point over the course of the season. I'm going to put the Ravens above the Cardinals.
Ooh, wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's Bill Cosby doing
Owen Wilson.
Frank Sinatra doing Owen Wilson. Nailed it. Yeah, I think. But as I said, I'm not a big power rankings person. We don't really do power rankings, although we kind of do power
Every
rankings
week.
every week. And
Every week we hate doing it. Every week we hate it, but we disclaimer we don't do it.
No, I've gotten really good at having Eddie say he doesn't do power rankings and then making him put some teams into a definitive list. I get to do it every week to him.
But yeah, and the next few weeks are going to answer a lot of those questions, right? Because a lot of these teams play tougher opponents, and then you'll get a better sense. And I think until the midway point of the season, even 2/3 of the way in, it's difficult. The Cardinals haven't really had any major issues with injuries yet. Who knows what, that's the big question mark for them. Can Murray stay healthy? And that was the reason I kind of picked the Browns this week. And then it was the Browns who had a nightmare in injury-wise with Baker being the one who was hurt and then came back in. And then, now both running backs are out, missing both their tackles. Wheels kind of came off for them over the course of that
How do you
game.
feel about the Browns?
The thing I hated about their performance on Sunday was that they have this identity, which I felt like against the Chargers, they stuck to who they were, which was they're going to rely so heavily on their run game. And I know without Chubb that they lost the sort of whatever you want to call it, thunder and lightning approach that they can have with their two running backs. And you can't sort of ground and pound quite as much. I did just feel they barely ran the ball against the Cardinals, even when they started to get back into the game, because they were out of it, then they sort of worked their way back in, and then they had possessions. I mean, they had the ball before that Baker Mayfield injury and turnover. I think they were down 10 at that point with the ball in the Cardinals' half. So they were very much in a scenario where if you score a touchdown here, it's game on. And they kept kind of, up until that injury, getting themselves kind of back in the game, and then they just weren't doing the things. And it's what I respect about the Ravens so much this year, is that the Ravens have embraced that identity, and even when they're losing, they don't start to abandon it and get desperate. And what I fear with the Browns is maybe they're 1 year of maturity away from just having that confidence in themselves to be losing and saying, we're going to stay with plan A right now. And I feel like that panic sets in quickly with them, where as soon as they fall behind, they feel like, we can't keep running the ball because then the clock's going to become a factor. And, maybe we haven't had as much success early on as we expected to have. Whereas I do think a run game, if you're good at it, it's a commitment to it, because you kind of feel like we're going to tire them out. We're going to drag their line all over the place. It's what you see the Titans do so well, where they can have the run game cannot work for 3 quarters. And then all of a sudden, in the fourth quarter, it's unstoppable because they've just tired you out and they've dragged you all over the field. And then all of a sudden, those holes are there that weren't there 5 minutes into the game. That would be my fear. But they're also getting killed by injuries. I mean, OBJ is not healthy. They're obviously missing Landry, missing both tackles now, missing both running backs. Now, quarterback who's at
Call
best
them the Niners.
60-70%.
Yeah.
Eddie, maybe this is the curse of
Midwest.
Eddie. Any team that Eddie starts to like, they just get decimated by injuries.
I mean, you're the one with the curse, but sure, maybe
Well,
this is
remember the Steelers
That's
have won
your
every
cross to
game
bear.
since Frank said that the Steelers were losing every game this season. They've now won the last 2, so that could be a good little curse turnaround. But we obviously mentioned all those teams, but what about the Chiefs? Like, I know they got back on track with a win, but it was still pretty sloppy win. What was it? 3 more turnovers for Mahomes. That snap, fumble, interception was pretty funny.
One of the worst things I've ever seen a quarterback do ever at any level. I mean, like high school, Pop Warner, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen. And I get the snap fumbled and it was a bad snap and he panicked, but it doesn't matter. You don't just run to the left and just throw the ball like a grenade.
Loop it 8 yards.
But I'll tell you, I think that second half could have been the turning point for them, because they've got an easy.
I'm not willing.
They've got an easy schedule, like we said last week, coming up, and I think they came into that second half and said, "Enough is enough. We're playing like absolute trash," and I think that could have been a decent start to turning it around and now cruising through these next few weeks and getting back on track.
I mean, you saw that a little bit with Tyreek Hill. He got very sort of animated when he scored the touchdown that put him into the lead.
And the Honey Badger at half, did you see him screaming at the coaches and stuff?
Yeah, but then that also worries me, that you might get too much emotion coming into this, and that there might be an overreaction. There was a kind of maybe too much confidence and calm that, hey, we're going to be able to switch it on, and then now it's pressure showing and cracks will be exposed by them suddenly feeling as if, oh, people are doubting us, and no, we're going to show that we have it, and we're going to show them week in, week out now. They're going to make the playoffs. They're just too good, and when they play bad teams, teams just can't keep up with them. But I didn't see anything in that game that made me doubt the fact that if they play a good team, they play the Bills, even if they play the Packers, even if they played, and that would obviously be in the Super Bowl, but, like any host of teams where the opposition would just need to go into it saying, we need to score 50, but we think we can score 50. And if we get 2 turnovers, 2 stops, we win this game. And I think there's 7 or 8 teams in the NFL who would feel comfortable in that. And I even think the Raiders would feel comfortable knowing that that was the situation. So I think they'll make the playoffs. They'll beat up on bad teams, but I don't give them much hope of winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so I mean, overall, it was an exciting weekend for NFL. I mean, I think I had some more interest in it from a financial aspect, but made it more thrilling or stressful, I guess. But one of the takeaways of being stressed out is I don't know how you can be a Minnesota Vikings fan. The risk for heart attack on that team. Why is it every week that it's like a nail biter every week, no matter who they play? It's crazy to me how close every one of their games gets. And I don't know if it's they just can't put teams away, if it's bad coaching, if it's just the mentality, but it's got to be so frustrating to watch a team that could be leading their division right now. If it weren't for the fact that they just get stuck in these close games and it's a crapshoot whether they're going to win or lose in the last minute every game. It's crazy.
I mean, there was a point in that game. What was it, when they were like 3rd and 8-point lead, 2 minutes left, and all they did was kind of run it a few times. Were getting nowhere with it. Continued to run 3rd down, then 4th down, punted, and it was like, yeah, okay, I understand. Like, is Darnold gonna do like 80 yards in that kind of time with 2-point conversion?
No, 95, 96. It was a good punt.
It was a great punt.
It was a good
I saw that
punt.
punt and said, "Oh, okay. I think it's going to be okay."
Yeah.
And then had them 4th down,
4th and 8
in their own end zone, and allow a 26-yard play or whatever it was, which then changed the momentum. And then they had them 4th down again, and they allow them to get it on another 4th down. I mean, they had probably in the final 3 minutes 5 plays where all they needed to do was make a play, nothing spectacular, just a play, and they win that game there and then. And I mean, on the game tying drive, all they needed was that on either of those 4th downs or on the 2-point conversion, which was like the easiest 2-point conversion I've ever seen. Just a little shuffle pass, and he just goes in. I mean, usually 2-point conversions, you do see an element of panic, even when they work kind of well, that the quarterback's rolling out and the kind of play starts to break down a little bit, and then someone's wide open. But this was just, oh no, we scored. As if we had 4 attempts and we've just got it on the first.
Yeah, and it shows you how confident they were, because that's a slightly risky call to call like a fake inside shuffle pass as your 2-point conversion. That's like something the Chiefs would do. But to be the Panthers and have come back from that and say like, oh yeah, let's pull this half a trick play out for the 2 points, I'm confident. Like, that just shows you they knew the mindset of the Vikings there. But I mean, you go through their games, it's crazy to me. I mean, you have they lose to the Bengals 27-24. They beat the Cards 34-33. They lose to the Browns 14-7. They beat the Lions 19-7.
No, they lost. They lost to the Cards.
Sorry, lost to the Cards 34-33. Yeah, sorry, lost to the Cards
and missed
Yep.
the game-winning field goal from whatever it was 30 yards.
Yep. Beat the
potential game-winning
beat the
field
Lions
goal
with the game-winning field goal.
Beat themselves. That's
yeah. It's got to be tough. I mean, I guess you take that over being a Giants fan and watching them basically look like a JV team compared to the Rams. But yeah, I still think the Vikings are a good team. I think they're a legitimate contender. I think they can win a few games. And Kirk Cousins looks great. Did you see last week? He gave his coach. Yeah.
You like that? But yeah, on that note, should we switch things over to the interview?
I think everyone will enjoy it and get something positive out of it for sure.
Hopefully everyone gets something positive. And welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast. We are delighted to be joined by our guest this week, who is Nathan Horrocks, former National Hunt jockey and now co-founder of Equine Productions and Jockey Cam. Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
No, thank you for having me on. It's always a joy to come on to a podcast that's involved with sport and and filmmaking and just telling stories around our industry, and I'm really excited to be on the show.
Yeah, it's great. And Frank, we will have already kind of gone around the horn, I guess, pre-interview, but how are you doing?
No, I'm doing great. I'm actually really excited for the interview. I watched a bunch of the videos and we were talking a little off air, but after watching them, I just really was getting excited for horse racing, and it actually made me go and look at Breeders' Cup and see if they were releasing more tickets, and I saw that they actually were opening up tickets this week. So I looked at it. You inspired me just in the right time that I didn't miss the release of the tickets. So hopefully I can get to Breeders' Cup because it's not too far in San Diego this year for me. So I'm excited.
And Nathan, I guess maybe that's a good jumping off part for us. Obviously, maybe this is going to kind of go backwards through your career to a certain extent, but now in your involvement in terms of Equine Productions and Jockey Cam, you're now based in the United States, and I know you've actually been involved in the Breeders' Cup in the past. How does that work?
The Breeders' Cup were our first client really, actually, in the US. Pete Rotondo, who unfortunately is not with the Breeders' Cup anymore. He spoke to us in, I think it was 2017, when Breeders' Cup was held at Del Mar for the first time, if I'm correct. I think Frank's nodding. So I think that was the right time, and they hired us to come over. It was sponsored by Aston Martin at the time, so it was a big deal that we'd been bringing this technology over from the UK to the US, and we had it on Mike Smith on every one of his rides, and it was just great working with Mike and NBC and the Breeders' Cup team. Since then, we've done lots of Jockey Cam work around the world. Hong Kong, Melbourne, the Melbourne Cup, which has been great going down there, but also the likes of the Arc de Triomphe and and a lot of the stuff in the UK. So it's been a real journey getting here. I think what's most exciting about it really is now we can finally show what's going on in the race. When we're watching that big wide angle of horse racing that we see day in and day out, we don't actually see the skill set of the horse and rider, because it's so far away, and it kind of, these guys are so good, or these guys and girls are so good, I should say. We don't appreciate the skill set, and I think everybody that's probably listening to this is a sports fan or played some sport in some way, shape or form, so we can relate to a lot of sports. But unless you've travelled at 45 miles an hour, standing on 6 inches of carbon Kevlar, holding onto a set of reins, on a half-ton thoroughbred that has a mind of its own, till you've physically done that, is very hard to relate to. So I think bringing this technology in and putting the audience in the saddle within the race, showing those split decisions that these guys and girls have to make is a key thing to our sport, really.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point right there, which is, I have this discussion all the time. I'm sort of having grown up in the US and living in Europe and having British parents and stuff, so you always get into these more cultural debates on sports, and that people won't have a certain level of respect. You'll get British people who don't like baseball, or Americans who think that cricket's really easy, or whatever it is. And fundamentally, my point is always, until you've actually tried it, to appreciate the level of skill that goes into any aspect of a sport, it's very difficult to judge, because professional athletes, for the most part, make it look really simple. And I do think it's when we had Sean Levy on, we spoke to him a little bit about this, is the vast majority, even of people who are passionate about the racing industry, will not have ridden horses much, and certainly not competitively. And so their ability to then adequately or effectively judge what the jockey is doing and their performance, it's really hard when you've never done it. I always think that's kind of an interesting side to the sport.
Well, I think it's a great point, that, Ed, and I think, we're all guilty of this. I was guilty of it. We used to have a show on in the UK called Ski Sunday, and I used to love watching the ski, the World Championships of skiing. And I remember thinking, oh, that looks really cool. I think I could do that, till I put on a set of skis and had that moment of that meltdown on the mountain when you can't get down or you can't stand up, and that meltdown of like, why is this so hard? It's it's a real moment for me to go, all right, I need to appreciate the skill set more of what athletes bring to the table. Remember going to Wimbledon for the first time. My mum's a huge tennis fan, and managed to get us tickets, and it was the first time I'd actually sat down, behind watching a tennis player hit the ball, and it's the physicality of actually hitting it, but also shaping the ball, and the sound it makes when it comes off a racket makes a completely different sound to when I actually hit a tennis ball. It's the same in golf. It's that same thing, watching these athletes right next to them and being involved with it. I think you don't feel the appreciation of what they bring to the sport till you've actually physically tried it yourself. And I think that's a huge point that you brought up there, really.
Yeah, for me, I play a lot of hockey. I played hockey my whole life, and when you go to watch a hockey game, it looks fast, but at the same time, you can kind of see what's going on and see like where plays are developing. But then once you actually play the game, you realize how fast and how quick it is, and how like instantaneous decisions, like how quickly they're made. And I love horse racing, but I've never really ridden horses, and it wasn't until I saw the jockey cam footage for like the first time that you really get a feel for, one, how fast they're going, and two, kind of almost how limited their range of vision is, but yet they're still able to do so much on the horse. They're able to maneuver it and position it and pull it out if need be, and kind of get out of trouble and things like that. And then when you add the jumps to it, that just makes it even more amazing with how little they can see of the jump and how little the horse can see of the jump. And the appreciation once you see that jockey cam footage is so amazing.
No, I'm glad it's doing that, really, Frank, because I think the other thing that we don't kind of get the grasp of what's happening is it's just everything. It's not just, if we have an 8-runner race, that's not 8 brains out there. That's 16, because horses are making decisions as well. They might want to go left when you're wanting to go right. Because they're they're instinctive animals. And you're trying to communicate with them, the best way possible, whether it's through your fingertips holding the reins, or your feet squeezing them, or your voice. People don't realize how much we use our voices in a race. We're constantly communicating. Horses are like people. They're either lazy, they're can be aggressive, they can be timid and nervous. So you've got to work out what's the best way of communicating with these animals, and I think, if anything, the visuals are helping us understand slowly what's going on within a race, and the split decision things that these guys have to do.
And so then I guess I have to admit, I think Jockey Cam will be familiar to almost anyone who's ever watched horse racing, because you do see it so regularly now. I guess if we use that as the focus of the discussion for now, but what goes into that in terms of how do you get a jockey to agree to it? Is it the jockey's decision? Is it, the owner has to be involved, the trainer has to be involved? What's the sort of process then? Is it the television network covering it who then says one of the jockeys has to take the jockey cam for this race? What's that process like?
Yeah, that process is actually the hardest part of it, actually. The technology bit is, I'm gonna sound silly here saying it was easy, because it hasn't been easy. It's been a real big journey to get here, because the camera is been safety tested. So we do have riders that go down every now and again. In particular, national hunt racing, jump racing. 1 in 7 rides a rider will come off a horse. So that camera needs to be safe. So there was a lot of safety testing going into developing the camera. So we had to get trust from the riders and the authorities. The British Horse Racing Authorities back in the UK, the Dr. Jerry Hill was a key part of that. But what we also did was we worked with the riders of what it would look like and what shape it should be and where it should go. So we worked with me being an ex-jockey obviously helped, but we wanted, is the next generation of jockeys that we wanted to work with to make sure that they were happy wearing it. And I would say, 99.9% of the time, the jockeys are very, very happy to wear it. But there's then that little, it's the big race, it's the Kentucky Derby or something, and we've got, we've asked the guy that's riding the favourite, and all of a sudden they become nervous and like, oh no, not this time, So we do get that every now and again. I understand that because I was very superstitious when I was riding. I would always put my right boot on first before my left boot and things like that. Well, sport's full of these little things, so that can happen. Regards to the owners and trainers, what happens is that the jockey cam weighs around about half a pound with the camera on the jockey's head, and they carry a little tiny transmitter on the jockey's back, and that's been safety tested as well to transmit the picture basically. And that whole process is so they carry exactly the same weight as anybody else. So there's no difference to whoever's wearing the camera. Whether it be the favorite or whatever, they're all carrying the same weight. So they weigh out with this device. They're carrying the same weight as they would be if they weren't wearing the camera. So there's never really any issues from the trainer or the owners. In fact, sometimes they kind of like it because they get to see it back. But when NBC first approaches about this, their goal is we want a camera on every rider in the Kentucky Derby in the next 10 years. Now, easier said than done because it's logistically it's very hard at the moment and the technology is not quite there yet. So we're only able to do like 2 or 3 live cameras in a race. At the moment, we're currently only at 2 just because of the frequencies we have to get in and all that sort of stuff. But generally, it's the broadcaster or the simulcaster, as I'm learning here, living in the US, that's what we call it. They're the people that hire us, and then we work within the sport. And then lucky enough, that's it's great that we can work with the racetrack and the stewards and the participants. But everyone wants to make it work, and lucky enough that the sport's been really has given us great access to make this thing bring it to you guys back at home.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about the jockeys kind of wanting to be on board, and I'm sure you have jockeys that are a lot more open to it because of their personality. So one that comes to mind is Frankie Dettori. I know he's had the jockey cam on before, and I think you even have a flying dismount with the jockey cam. I think I've seen that, which is really awesome. But I have to say, no disrespect, but I've never seen Ryan Moore wear a jockey cam, and that doesn't kind of surprise me.
No, Ryan is his own being, and he laughs even now. I'll still every now and again go, "Come on, Ryan, when am I going to put this on you?" And for some reason, Ryan's always been like that. He's always been, a bit standoffish with things like this, and he just wants to get the job done. And I understand that, I really do. However, my argument with the likes of the Ryan Moores in this world, and I've had these words within myself. I've said, something inspired you to get into the sport. You're in a very, very privileged position. You're getting paid to do what you love. And I think when you're getting paid to do something that you love, whatever it is, whatever world you're working in, you need to give back a little bit. And I'm not saying that Ryan Moore should wear a jockey cam, but I'm just saying you should give back a little bit. And that's always my argument, because, the sport's been very good to me and I've always tried to give back. And I think a lot of people should follow suit as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And if you don't have those personalities that are really engaging and inspiring within the sport, within any sport, then it's, those are what attract people to get involved. And they and this is with the utmost. I mean, Ryan Moore is obviously an incredible jockey, but I think a lot of people necessarily see the personality that he gives across and think that's exactly what I want to be when I grow up, whilst he is, professional and reliable and, from a behavioral standpoint, checks all the boxes.
Well, yeah, no, and I think if you're hitting a real great point there, but if it what Frank Dettori's been fantastic for our industry, and in fact, the trailer came out today of the new film of his that's come out that we've been helping out with as well, which is called Dettori, which comes out in I think it comes out in November, which is I'm really excited for you guys to see. I've been lucky enough to see this, and it's going to be a great an hour and a half of a human story within this crazy world of horse racing. But if it wasn't for the likes of the Steve Korth and Cassius Musin, coming from America, we wouldn't have had Frank Dettori, because he kind of modelled himself on those guys, and they were always very open and chatty about the sport, because we all need to be inspired to get back into it, And I think that's one thing that I've always tried to do, is try and inspire the next generation of horse racing fans, really, and sport is a great way of telling human stories, and I think that's a key thing to our sport, really.
And I guess we can keep jumping around a little bit within your career then, because obviously you had this background as a jockey and around 10 years as a professional jockey in the United Kingdom. Obviously not necessarily hitting the heights that you might have hoped to have done. What was that sort of experience like as a day-to-day jockey?
Ed, very kind.
As a day-to-day jockey, just sort of making a living. What was that like?
Yeah, no, it's. I think that's one thing that hasn't really been shown, is the hardship of the life of a jockey. It's great when you have a winner. It feels fantastic. But if a jockey's doing well, they're probably getting around about 15 to 20% win strike rate. Now, if you were a football team or a hockey team, with a 20% strike rate, win strike rate, you're not going to be around very long, are you? Do you know what I mean? You need to be doing much better than that. So I think one thing that people don't understand, or the public doesn't understand, is the amount of time that you're losing, and that can take its toll on you as a sports person, because we're competitive and we want to win. But most of the time you're getting beat. And then the other side of that is the dieting that people don't understand, is the constant trying to beat the scales, I remember having a strong conversation with a member of the press. He wasn't very happy that one of the jockeys didn't give him a great interview after a race, and called him miserable. And I said to him, do you get grumpy when you're hungry? And his answer was yes, like most people. And I said, well, imagine waking up like that every day. That does take its toll on you, is this constant battle for not just food, but for water as well, because they're constantly trying to get rid of weight. So there's two ways of getting rid of weight. There's not eating, and then getting rid of water. And that's why they spend a lot of time in the sauna. And that can take its toll on you. That constant battling with the scales, and then there's the other side of it, which is the amount of traveling that these guys and girls do. There's a lot of traveling involved. So it's a lot of time on your own, with your own thoughts, getting beat all the time, feeling hungry. It just starts weighing you down and chipping away at you over time. So it's amazing that we've had champions likes of Sir Anthony McCoy been around for so long time. Frankie riding till he's 50. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And it's just I take my hat off to those people that have carried on like that in this sport, because I only lasted 10 years, and there was a reason why I only lasted 10 years of that, and that's because I didn't like hospital food. So I wanted to do something else, and that's why I got into filmmaking.
And I think that's actually a nice segue into your film, which you wrote and directed, called The Fall. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, I highly suggest you go and watch it. It was really great. It reminded me a little bit almost of it had a Black Mirror feel to it, but with sports, and kind of showing the, a little bit of the dark side of how social media and this, instant technological feedback can really affect a person, and kind of showing the hardships of that. And it was really, really nice. And I kind of just want to get your thoughts. You had said off air it was a passion project of yours, and kind of give us the insight of how it came to be, and kind of where it came from, the idea.
Well, the idea really came through my own experience of battling with my own mental health. I suffered, from depression myself. I even tried to take my own life at one point. It was a really really dark day. I remember the day really well, and you know after that I got help. We've seen it in recent films or recent interviews. In particularly men. We have there's a stigma against mental health. We're not very good at talking. Being a British man as well, we're we're very uptight at the best of times, but also being a working class northern British man, there was all those things as well that kind of hold you in really. And we're just not very good at kind of talking about our issues or our problems. And then also being a sports person, you can't show weakness. You can't ever give anybody an inch to an advantage to you. So showing any weakness at all is something is a no-no in sport. And so going through that whole experience of being a jockey, working within the industry like I have done, and working with these athletes, I've gone from being an insider looking outwards, and then from being an outsider looking inwards, which was a real valid point for me to go through that whole process. And so what I did was, through therapy, I started writing this short story of a journey after a bad day at the office. Every one of us, listening to this and us on this call now, we've all had a bad day at work. And I wanted to show what a bad day at work looked like for an athlete, really, but in particular a jockey, because there's with social media, it wasn't around when I was riding, thankfully. If I'd got beaten on a favourite or whatever and walking back in, I'd have the odd bit of abuse hurled at me, which I still see from day to day now and again. But social media has opened up a platform for people to not only say I'm disappointed with your ride, but for some reason it's given us the permission to be really, really hateful. And within the film, we use real tweets that were sent to jockeys and real messages that were sent to jockeys. And I think when people watch this, they'll be shocked at the venom that's used in this. And when I wrote the script, I showed it to my wife, and she's not from the horse racing background at all, or sport. She doesn't, she has no idea why people would put themselves through this sort of thing. And when she read the script, she's like, you're gonna have to calm the language down in the part where he reads the tweets. And I said, no, they were actually real tweets that were sent to him. She just was shocked by that. And so that what I wanted to do was, and it's funny you used to say it was quite dark, the film. I wanted to show the darker side of where the sport can go, which isn't like me at all, because I'm all about promoting the sport and I want people to get involved with our sport, because it is a fantastic sport to be involved with, because we've got the connection between animal and man, and it's a great sport to be involved with, and the connections that you make. But with all those things that we were talking about earlier, the dieting and all those pressures, there's those, and then you put the social media stuff on top of that, there could be a tipping point somewhere. And unfortunately, 2019, lost two very good jockeys in James Banks and Grand National winning jockey Liam Treadwell, who both took their lives. And once I'd written this story, that's when I was like, right, I have to do something with this. I've got to create something, and I want to show the wider world what it actually feels like and what it looks like. So that was a big thing for me, really, to get this whole thing started.
No, I think you've managed to put all of what you've just spoken about into a relatively short viewing experience. So I do think anyone who wants to see it who isn't familiar with the racing industry, it's not something that you have to be passionate about horse racing to find to be a compelling story, which I also think is a sign of how well done it was. I do think it's the interesting side of racing. I'm not sort of that heavily involved in social media. We do a bit through the podcast. It's just, you can guarantee after every race, people who have lost their bets go on social media, and the level of venom in what people say, just the constant conspiracy that it must have been a fix, at any jockey that's fallen off must have taken a dive, or any favorite that's not come in, that it must have been a predetermined outcome, and you just see it. It must be, I would say, 30 to 50% of what's being said post race, and that's even in situations where the winners performed extremely well, or there's no credit given to anyone else involved in the race. It's simply people unhappy that they've lost money. And I do think we on the show and just in general love the sport for the sport itself, and the betting is definitely a part of it, but it's not the reason you're sort of necessarily watching the races. It's one of the difficult parts of the sport where betting is so closely tied to most people's interest that it then leads to such sort of aggressive reactions to things that they then watch.
Well, yeah, that's a great point, Ed. And because horse racing and gambling go hand in hand, really. Yes, we've always been able to bet on sports, but it's usually been horse racing, which is the main thing for having a flutter, having a bet. And we can bet on all things now. We can bet on the winner of the X Factor or the winner of America's Got Talent now. We've got all these platforms where we can actually have a flutter on these things that where there's an outcome, and with an outcome there's a result, and if the result doesn't go your way, there's obviously an opinion, and the platforms have opened up that it's given a doorway for people to have an opinion, and sometimes that opinion isn't how they would probably act in public, but because it's on social media and they're behind a whatever it is, they're able to say what they want. And I think what this film is trying to do is trying to say, with your reaction, there is an effect on somebody, and it's not just the jockey that's had the bad day at the office. It's the people around him. It's his partner, it's his family. That's what I wanted to show, really, that at the end of the day, the sports people are humans. We've seen it with Naomi Osaka at the, in the tennis. She's raised her hand saying, this has got to stop. The way we treat each other. We've seen it in the Olympics with Simone Biles as well. There's been a lot of this stuff documented recently of how these social media platforms have opened up a gateway to hate, really. And I think the social media platforms need to be held accountable, but that needs to come from the government. It can't be from them. They're all there to try to make money, and that's fine. But we need to hold them accountable, the people that are sending it accountable, because I know it can be done. It can be done. They can definitely make sure that some of this stuff doesn't reach the athlete, because they're looking for other stuff as well. So it's not that they can't do it, but I probably think the pressure needs to come from government, really, and hopefully this film it's not going to change the world, I know that, but hopefully it might just make somebody think twice about what they're going to say or do or react in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the other commentary that I really liked in the film was that this is obviously about horse racing and jockeys, but you can pull it out to athletes in general. Not all athletes and jockeys are rich, wealthy, super successful. There are a lot of, especially jockeys, that are struggling to survive in the real world with finances, and still having to do this. Whereas I think people see the Dettoris and the Ryan Moores and all those really super successful jockeys, and they think, oh, he lost this race, it doesn't matter to him. He screwed me, but he's going to be fine. Whereas there are so many jockeys out there where they need wins just as bad as the bettor, or the punter needs the win. So I really liked that you kind of brought that to light, that it's not every jockey is bringing home tons of money and living in these lavish conditions. It's a job. It's a job for a lot of them that is not super successful, and it's difficult.
No, I'm glad that came across, actually, Frank. And it was one thing that's been lovely about this journey that I've been on creating this film is the reaction from the jockeys themselves. I was worried that it might only talk to the UK based jockeys, but I've had some great conversations with jockeys here in the US about it, and they were saying the same thing. This could be about any sports person, and there's certain levels in every sport, isn't there? The top 10 in every sport are doing quite well. And that doesn't even matter if they're doing well. They still have pressures, but there is a a sports person somewhere down the line where they're doing it just to do the sport. They're on the breadline like everybody else is. And it's and that can be hard. And I've wanted to show that side of things. One jockey in particular sent me a nice message saying that that one thing that kind of resonated to him was the scene where he's having a conversation with his wife or girlfriend, however you want to perceive this, this scene. But Tom, the main character, has a conversation with his partner Emily, and she says, "Oh, look, I've got to go for a scan on Monday," and he said, "Oh, do you want me there?" Knowing that he can't be there, he's got to go and ride on the Monday, the same day that his partner's having this scan. He's lying to himself, and he's also lying to her, like offering up this thing. She knows he can't go. He's got to go and ride in this race. And it's that thing of sacrifice, really. Sports people sacrifice way more than most people. There's a lot of times where they don't get time to spend, their time with family and things like that. So I wanted to get that across as well. And that's one thing this, Richard Kingscote from the Jockey in the UK said to me. He said that was something that really stuck out to me in the times when I wasn't able to go and, go for a scan with my wife to, for the pregnancy test or whatever it was, because I've got to go and ride, because if I don't ride, I don't get paid. But it's not also that ride that day, it's the rides you're going to be getting in the future, because if you don't ride, someone else will take it, and then they might get your ride later on in life. You know what I mean? So there's this constant battle of not burning any bridges, or just trying to keep everybody happy. And as we all know on this call, trying to keep everybody happy all the time is a real tough thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's so true. And you bring up the U.S. jockeys, and this obviously the film was portraying UK jockeys, but do you feel there's a difference? I mean, so I've watched a lot of U.S. horse racing, and then I lived in Europe for a while, so I got really accustomed to UK horse racing, and I feel like there's more pressure, I think. Maybe pressure's not the right word, but I feel like U.S. jockeys kind of live a little bit more in the shadows, whereas UK jockeys are more front and center. Where in the U.S., if someone loses a race, it's, oh, that horse is crap, or it wasn't good, or it was off, or something. They'll have their vile reactions, but a lot of times it's more towards the horse. Whereas I feel in the UK, it's always jockey focused and jockey centered, and everyone knows a lot more about the jockeys and who the jockeys are. Do you feel that as well now that you've been living in the States a little bit?
Yeah, do you know what, Frank? I hadn't really thought about it till you just mentioned it, and it kind of makes sense what you're saying, because the jockeys in the UK are constantly trying to sell the sport. But I think one thing that we've got to remember is how vast this country is. You know what I mean? I've been living here a year, and you forget. I mean, I'm flying to Kentucky tomorrow. The time difference changes by the time I get there tomorrow. I'm losing hours. You know what I mean? So that just doesn't make sense. When I'm driving from London to Edinburgh for to ride in a race, I'm not going to lose any time. It's other than the time I have. But you know what I mean? It's we forget how vast it is. So I think the world of horse racing in the US is so big. It's kind of hard to have the jockeys front and center, because it's only the top guys really that fly in and around. Tomorrow, when I go to Keeneland, I'll probably bump into Jose Ortiz, but he's normally a New York rider, right? But he's going to be riding in Kentucky for a couple of big races. I'm not gonna see likes of the jockeys that I've been working with in Delmar, because that's their circuit and that's their tracks to promote and sell. So I see why it's more horse focused than jockey focused, whereas in the UK the jockeys are more in the forefront. They're probably more they're on TV more, and more in the limelight, as you just said. So I think that's probably one of the things that I've noticed. The other thing is the travelling, the amount of travelling that jockeys do in the UK. They'll be riding at in London, Kempton Park in one day. In the same day they'd have to drive to Ripon in North Yorkshire or something like that to ride. But lucky enough, with COVID, there's been a real positive thing that's come through. Is they're limiting jockeys only to ride at one meeting per day now, which I think is going to make a huge difference to their, the way of life and their mental well-being, because they're not just going to the racetrack to work. They're getting up every morning to go to a stable to exercise a horse, to hopefully win the ride on that horse, to ride it in the races, so there's just all the behind the scenes traveling that they have to do as well to manage, and I think that's going to help their mental state, a lot more than it has done in the past.
And just touching on before the story itself within the fall, because I sort of watched this and then was preparing for the interview and thinking about it, and obviously the social media element within it, and I don't want to kind of necessarily spoil anything from before anyone's seen it, but how much the sort of main storyline is obviously a somewhat struggling jockey who has his best ride not go as well as he would have hoped, and with the goal, obviously, it was going to go to Cheltenham, and that he would obviously have that opportunity. How much was that based on experiences that you had? Was that self-inspired, or was it just a sort of amalgam of what you've seen throughout, obviously, a story that would be familiar to a ton of jockeys?
Yeah, so the top Tom, who plays the main character, who's played by Daniel Thrace, who did an amazing job of becoming Tom, our main jockey, our main character, because like all sports movies, we've watched sports movies, a lot of us, I'm sure, the three of us on this call now. It's in the listeners, I'm sure, but if you've been in a certain sport and you watch certain sports films, sometimes that can be cringeworthy, I mean, I've got rugby friends that have watched, rugby movies and like, just that wouldn't happen. And I've done it with horse racing movies. You see the horse finishing second, the guy's hanging out the back teeth of this horse, trying to let the one that's supposed to win. Do you know what I mean? He's just like, you're just thinking, oh my God, it just feels so unauthentic, and I get frustrated with that. But I understand how hard it can be to replicate real sport on the screen. So in our ways of doing it in this film was I needed to find somebody with authenticity. And finding Daniel, I found authenticity in him because he felt like he was on the front foot. He had a real sort of, he had an agenda. He had somewhere to be. He was in he's doing his audition. He really grasped what it would feel like to to be on the front foot, and that's kind of what jockeys are like. They've always got somewhere to be. They're always for sale. They're always trying to win you over in some way, shape, or form. So finding him was great because I think we auditioned 40 people to actually then find Tom, the character, and Daniel did a great job of doing that. But going back to your main question, like, is it taken from personal experience? About 10% of that, character is me, and then the rest of it really is an accumulation of 3 or 4 different jockeys and 3 or 4 different car journeys that I've had with people, and I've just remembered that happening, and I remember that being a thing that would stick in my head. There's a scene where he gets he gets a bad message and he throws the phone across the the dashboard, like just in temper, and that's not a spoiler, everybody. By the way, it's you'll get the grasp of the movie, but what that happened to a friend of mine. I was in the car when it happened, him getting this bad news, and he just completely lost his mind and just threw the phone across the dashboard, and it was just one of those things where I thought, oh my, this news was so bad, he just lost his temper so much through this one thing, this bit of bad news that he got, because he'd been, what we call jocked off in the in the UK terms, where you lose the ride on the horse, the owner or the trainer doesn't want you anymore, and I think that was one of the key things that kind of started this process. And I would pick up little bits and little bit of articles and stuff, but most of it was experience of what I'd seen. And that was one of the key things that helped me create the character Tom, really. And I just wanted to show the human side of him, really, and that was a key thing, really.
We spoke about, actually, in our ARC preview, the concept of being jocked off. It happened to Colin Keane for his ride in the ARC. Now, we were sort of speculating as to whether or not there's any sort of negotiation that might go into it when you're someone as, relatively high profile as he is, but still not quite at that level. Is that simply regardless of the circumstances, the trainer is saying, not this time, maybe next time, there's nothing you can do, nothing more to be done?
Sometimes the trainer doesn't even tell you, it's your agent. Their agent is the one that delivers the blow, you know, and then you've got to smile through gritted teeth because you're at the racetrack that day, seeing the trainer and then watching somebody else, get on that horse that you were supposed to be riding. And I think that's what I wanted to do with the film as well. The horse that our main character rides is called Habitaire, and like you say, was running in a big race and would have won if if the horse hadn't fallen. But what I was trying to do as well in that short window, 20 minutes of this film, I wanted to make it longer, but budget restrictions wouldn't allow me, and COVID and all that type of stuff. But one thing I wanted to show in there was his him being told that he wasn't going to be riding this horse again. Well, that's not just him losing out on the money, or the success of the horse maybe winning, but he's worked really hard to get that horse to where it's got to. He'd won on the horse, on 3 wins before it, and he even says in the in the film, where he says, I brought that horse on, I did that. You even said yourself. So he's not also just losing that, but he's losing that connection with the animal, that he loves and adores. And I don't think people understand what connections we make with these horses. They're our teammates. They understand where we're coming from, and it's them relationships aren't just throw away. We love these animals, and I think that's one thing I tried to show in that short window that I had, but I think the key thing is you were saying earlier about the negotiations. Sometimes there's no negotiation; you're just told, and you've just got to smile and go, okay, hopefully I'll get on another one down the road, and that's the hardest part, I think.
So going off that connection with the man and the horse, kind of bring it into a little lighter side. Your company Equine Productions has done an amazing job putting together these really amazing videos for all different aspects of the horse racing industry, and how did that come about? How did that start? Why did you decide to get involved in making those, kind of starting the company and things like that?
Well, it was through frustration, really, Frank. It was we were talking off air earlier, weren't we? We were saying about how we get into the sport, and I was not getting into this sport when I was 15, 16 years old, even though my father was a jockey. I thought it was for, old, rich white people, I mean? It's just didn't speak to me in any way, shape or form. I just didn't feel as though it kind of spoke to me, I didn't feel invited. I felt the same about golf. I remember a friend saying, "Do you want to go and play golf?" I'm like, "What isn't that what old men do?" You know what I mean? I was into skateboarding and BMXing and anything that was kind of counterculture, really, growing up in that little town in North Yorkshire. And I think that was probably a part of me just wanting to escape, really. But one thing that I was keen to do once I'd got into the sport and fell in love with the sport was show it how I'd seen it. Now I'd never been to film school. I didn't know how to use a camera. I just had an idea that how can I show this sport in a better way, and in 2000, I think it was 2010, I remember seeing this short documentary on a guy called Mickey Smith, who was a surf photographer, and he made this film called Dark Side of the Lens. If you get a chance, please go and watch it. It's a love letter to his passion of surf photography, and he's actually the bass player of a very famous artist in the UK called Ben Howard, and this little short film just kind of gave me the permission to go and do it myself. We've been, music. It's happened in music over the last, 20 years. People have been making music in their bedrooms for the last, 20 years since we're able to create it and put it on a laptop and distort it or whatever it may be. But it was a self-made thing rather than having to go to a big studio. Well, that's happened with film over the years since the digital camera has come out. So we, even more so now with the iPhone, you put that tool in any kid's hand, they can go and tell a narrative from their perspective, and that was the key thing for me, really. I needed to find a way of helping tell my narrative of what I've seen and how I've done it. So at the time when I'd seen this, there was a lot of extreme sports movies coming out. They're all like these surf movies or snowboard movies and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, right, if I show my sport in the same way they're showing their sport, surely somebody will connect with it. If I remove the snowboarder and put the horse in frame and film it the same way, surely that will resonate with somebody and get them connected in some way, shape, or form. And that was the key thing for me, really. And that's when my business partner Dave James, who's a cameraman, and Sam Fleet, who was a former journalist. When the three of us got together, that's what we wanted to do. We just wanted to engage a new audience, and lucky enough, the racing industry, whether it be a stud farm in France to Channel 10 in Australia to ITV racing in the UK, we've been embraced by the whole industry, really, and they've really wanted to help bring a new aesthetic to how the sport is filmed, whether it be tracking vehicles or drones or slow-mo cameras or these little POV cameras that we're using now in Jockey Cam. So we just wanted to bring technology and ideas and creativity to this world that kind of felt stagnant to me, and that's me answering a very short question in a long way. So I apologize about that, but that's kind of that was my passion that I wanted to do.
No, it's a good answer, and I agree with you. It is a sport that can feel a bit stale at times, even if you are passionate about it, and also not necessarily that approachable for people coming from different backgrounds or who feel like they have no family connection to racing or anything. So I think it's great to try and put a modern twist on things. I love sports documentaries and sports content, and watch sports documentaries for sports I have no interest in. And I just think it's part of the beauty of sports is that the sort of storylines that come out of them are relatable, even if you've never done it. I never thought, Free Solo, which obviously got so much attention, I had no interest in rock climbing, but I was able to sit and watch a documentary about it and enjoy every moment of it, in part because it was beautifully shot, but also just because you could kind of relate to it, even if you're never going to go and try and climb a mountain.
It's such a great example.
Yeah, it is a great example, actually, Ed. I mean, yes, you said to somebody, there's a documentary about rock climbing. They'll be like, oh my God, it must take ages to climb up a rock, which it does. But how do you make that engaging? But it's the human story of that guy climbing, and how it was shot, the way it was used. I mean, there was parts of that film that makes. I'm not scared of heights, but I know a friend of mine that is, and he couldn't watch it because it gave him nausea watching, and that's because it made you he said it made his hands sweat watching it, so there's that fear factor of bringing to documentary filming, but there's also that. I think what's great about documentaries, sports documentaries in general, is the human journey. We can all relate to a human journey in some way, shape, or form, and I think that's a great way of tapping into somebody's psyche, really.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago when my parents came to visit for a holiday, and we were watching a movie, and I told my father, I said, have you ever seen this movie? He goes, wow, rock climbing? I don't want to watch it. And we put it on, and then the next morning I woke up to a text message. He had texted our whole family group saying, everyone needs to watch Free Solo immediately. It's crazy. It's so amazing. So if you put together an enthralling video like that, it doesn't matter what the sport is. People can always relate to it, and it's great. So I guess with that, what are some of the more fun experiences you've had with all the different things you've filmed? So, for instance, I saw you did one with a few of the jockeys and one of the heptathlon from the UK or from Great Britain in your Equine productions and things like that. So what are some of the cool videos that you shot over the years that you've enjoyed?
Yeah, no, it's been fun trying to mix sports. I mean, what we did one that was really, really fun that we did was and this wasn't to do with horse racing. This was to do with the sport of eventing, which is horses going over these crazy obstacles. I suppose it's like an assault course, really, but using a horse over around about 4 miles. And we were asked. There's a famous event in the UK called Burley, Burley Horse Trials, and that's what this sport is. It's 3-day eventing, and or cross country as some people call it in the world. But what we wanted to do was bring a new look to that, and we got some parkour runners to go over the obstacles, and they were like, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I said, "Well, what feels natural to get over this obstacle?" And it was so funny watching them be creative with these jumps. It was such a cool way of doing it. And also, what was great about that was these guys were going, "I can't believe a horse can jump this." I'm finding it hard. Oh yeah, and I would show them a picture or a slow motion bit of footage of a horse going over an obstacle, and it just blew their mind. So it was trying to bring the worlds together. That's which we're constantly trying to do. We've done some stuff with AP McCoy and Ian Wright, who was an Arsenal legend striker from the 80s. We've done some stuff with those two guys as well. Trying to mix the sports up, and that was a fun thing. But I think one of the major ones that we really enjoyed putting together was the Jockey Club approached us to promote the start of the flat season, and there was a very famous Audi R8 advert out at the time where the car is on a treadmill, and the camera starts from the front of the car and works its way back to the rear of the car, showing the engine, and it's the car starting off slow and then all of a sudden becomes at full speed, but it's just on this treadmill, like on a rolling road, as you guys call it here in the US. And I remember the Jockey Club saying to us, "How do we make a horse racing version of this?" Because it was blowing up everywhere in the UK. Everyone was like, "Have you seen this advert?" And Dave, James and I went away and we were like, right, well, we can't copy this, but we can come up with our own idea of how we film this. And you can find it on YouTube or Vimeo or on Facebook. It's called The Original Horsepower. And what we did was we took a horse that was going to be galloping on turf, and we put what's called a Russian arm next to it, which is a vehicle with this huge camera gimbal on it. And we started off by the side of the horse as it was walking, and by the end of the film, this horse is going flat to the boards, doing nearly 40 miles an hour. But the cameras stayed with it all the way, just all done in one shot. And it's it kind of blew a lot of people away, because they were like, how did you do that? How did you make that? Because wasn't the horse scared of the camera? And there was a lot of pre-production that went into that. But that was one thing I wanted to do, was I wanted to put somebody right next to the horse and have the feeling of what it would feel like to be next to a horse when it's galloping at full pelt like that. And we might add a lot of mics on the horse, so as you were going round the horse's, from his backside all the way up to where his head is, and where the nostrils are, you could hear the horse breathing heavily, and really give you an insight to what it must feel like to be next to a horse as it's galloping flat out like that. And I think that was one of our most exciting pieces to put together, really.
That sounds really neat. I'll have to check that out. But I kind of want to go back to this eventing and parkour mix, because for our listeners of the podcast know that Eddie is a very confident person, and when we discuss the Grand National, Eddie has said that he can complete the Grand National. So I think we have a great opportunity for a viral video of having Eddie trying to jump over the fences in the Grand National, and having you guys put a top-notch presentation to it.
Have you ever been to the Grand National, Ed?
So there needs to be some context here. The completion is on foot, not on a horse, and the idea was given unlimited time, and that also it was not going to be particularly graceful. So obviously climbing over, beach shirts is not necessarily going to look great, but that I was confident I could get around.
Well, I mean, it's
Nathan. What do you think about that?
It is a true test, isn't it? I'm not sure. Well, I mean, if he had unlimited time, I'm sure he'd be able to do it, I think. But him getting over an obstacle in a graceful way, I'm right in thinking that it's not going to be very graceful at all. It's going to have to be a sort of dive over thing. But going back to the Grand National, that's when we launched Jockey Cam. We were really lucky to, when we launched it, that a horse that I was heavily involved with, a horse called Many Clouds. who won the 2015 Grand National. I used to ride out every morning, and he was part of the Jockey Cam experience when we were developing the camera. I was riding out him and wearing the camera and working out where the pitch mark should be, because it's pitched up. So, when the jockey stands up in the irons, that it's just not looking down at the horse's neck. It needs to be sat in the right position. And the day before the Grand National, on the Friday, we launched the camera with Channel 4 Racing, and we were lucky enough or unlucky enough, however you want to put it, but Aidan Coleman was riding a horse called Benny's Mist, and unfortunately Benny and Aidan came away from each other at one of the fences, and Aidan stuck under the fence as all these horses are flying over him, and he's got the camera on. And it is 10 minutes of the most crazy footage you have ever seen. So if anybody wants to dig it out, it's Aidan Coleman and type in Jockey Cam, and it'll pop up, because it is an experience of a lifetime watching this guy stuck under this fence of all these other horses going over the top of him. We were just so lucky to capture that. And what was lovely about the end of that clip, and you'll see this, and it's not a spoiler at all, but Aidan goes over to grab a loose horse, because there was a couple of loose horses in the race, and one of them is Benny. Benny's missed his horse, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, Benny," and I'm so sorry about that. I'm patting him on the neck, and because he was just living in the moment. He wasn't, yes, he had a camera on, but he's forgotten about all that after being stuck in the fence. But that was just him genuinely just loving on his fellow athlete, that they'd come apart and not been able to finish the race together. So I think that was kind of like a key point for us, really, of all of a sudden now we can really show what goes on in these races.
So then I guess as we get towards sort of wrapping up, it would be interesting. You've already spoken about one of the challenges in Jockey Cam is the goal to have every jockey be able to have a camera on and to have a live broadcast. What are the other goals in terms of the future of the technology and the ways you think in which it can be used?
One I'd like to, sooner rather than later, is start bringing in is helping the sound of the race. We've been NBC do it every now and again when they do the Kentucky Derby. One of the jockeys will wear like a mic, so you can actually hear the hooves of the racing, and mainly that's usually a bed that they put underneath. What we use, a bed of sound of former races that they've captured, and just to help give the aesthetic of that. But I'd love to have it where you can actually have mics in races, and what's to say that we don't take examples from Formula One, where the team can actually talk to the rider. How amazing would that be? I'm sure lots of my jockey friends would be like, "What are you talking about? We don't want that happening." But I'm sure that happened in Formula One, where look what's happened with Drive to Survive, which is a series on Netflix at the moment. That's done for the sport of Formula One, because you're not only just getting the visual aspects of the film, but you're also getting the whole landscape of sound and relationships that's going on between the team and the driver and the owners and all that type of thing. So, if anything, I just want to kind of open the doors more into the sport, really, and and technology obviously is a way of doing that, but also storytelling. That's my passion, and one day we might see a Drive to Survive version of horse racing. You never know.
I think that's a great idea, and I'm sure it's something that you would happily or probably pitching all over the place. Who knows? But I think yes, it would be. I think it's a sport that's perfect for it, in the sense that I think part of what can make those documentaries compelling, and we had someone from Netflix's Last Chance U on the podcast. I actually think when you know less about the sport and the people, it's one thing when you watch the Manchester City Amazon series, you already know what happens, or the Spurs version. If you have any familiarity with football, yes, you'll get insights that you didn't see otherwise, but you kind of know what's going to happen. If they're going to win the league or not. Whereas I think the nice thing about the horse racing, even if you're following horse racing really closely, they're going to be races you see that you just didn't catch over the course of the season, if they're not Group 1s, if it's a random Wednesday and you don't realize the importance of them plays later in the season. So I do think it's a perfect sport for it in some respects. I also think the sound issue you touched on is really interesting, because I noticed that when I watch obviously a lot of British horse racing and then a lot of French horse racing, I'm assuming France uses that the track of the sound on races here because you constantly have the sort of the hooves hitting the ground whenever you're watching a French race, which you don't really get in the UK as much. So I guess, and it does change the way, sort of, it changes the feeling you get as you watch the race itself.
No, I mean, well, two things. There was one thing I want to ask you quickly before I go back onto the sound thing. Who was the guy you had on from Last Chance U? Was that Greg Whiteley?
No, we had from the basketball version, we had one of the assistant coaches on from the most recent. They're now doing the second season with East LA Community College. So Rob Robinson.
That's right. Yeah. No. Yeah. I was hoping it was actually the producer and director, which is Greg Whiteley, who I'm a huge fan of because I've loved that whole series from the word go. I thought this has been done so well. These are human stories. But using sport as a way to tell the narrative, really. And I thought that was done really, really well. And it's great that Netflix are continuing to push that series because that's another one I tell all my mates that they've got to watch it because it's just that element of a coach trying to help these young players not only be better players but be better people. You know, to be a good person in life, you will get on, and it's just trying to get the best out of them in some way, shape, or form. And I love that series. But the fact that like you're saying about the sound, one thing I always do when I'm taking a new person horse racing, I'd either take him down to the last fence, or last hurdle, or the last furlong, down by the rail. They have no idea how loud it sounds of those, half-ton animals, hitting the ground, galloping along, and the sound of them breathing and the jockeys pushing and that whole chaos that's going on is mesmerizing. And it's funny how they kind of back off when they're stood down by the last fence or the last furlong because they just didn't realize the atmosphere of what it's like. Because they're hugely powerful, these animals, and I think that's something that doesn't really come across that well when we're watching horse racing on on the simulcast or broadcast TV, and that's one thing we tried to do in that horsepower clip that we made for the Jockey Club to promote the flat racing. So I hope that's done the best it can do to do that. But I think going forward, a series on our sport would be amazing, and maybe one day we might have one.
Yeah, and you're so right about the sound too, because we attend Royal Ascot every year, so a bunch of us all get together and we meet and go, and we always, unfortunately, we can't get the last furlong on the rail, but we can get 3 furlongs down on the rail, and you can watch as many horse races on television, but once you're on that rail, and you're right, not only can you hear it, you can feel it. I mean, you can literally feel the horses as they're coming down and as they pass you, and you can hear the jockeys start to kind of yell and position themselves and talk. It adds such another dimension to it, and I think when you can get that dimension and put it onto the actual video, it will make such a big difference. I really believe that, because that's one of my favorite parts, is going onto the rail and being able to kind of get that extra feeling of being there, with the sound and everything. So that's awesome. But
one thing sorry, go on. I was just going to say one thing we've been playing around with as well is VR. We created a race back in the UK in a place called Newbury Racecourse, where the Lockinge, for you racing fans out there, you all know the Lockinge, I'm sure, the first Group 1 in the UK. What we did was we recreated a race where it would be it was choreographed, basically. So rather than it being a real race, and the jockeys wearing they were wearing these 360 cameras. So we choreographed a race where we knew what the outcome was going to be, basically, but without it looking like, I spoke about it earlier, where the guy in second's pulling the horse back to let the other one win. So it was choreographed to make sure that the horse starting at the back would win the race. And one thing that I wanted to do was give the experience of what it's like actually to physically ride a horse, taken away from what I've learned with Jockey Cam. So this VR experience that we created, we put mics on the horses, so you got the sound of the jockeys and the tannoy. So when you put this VR headset on, it's absolutely mesmerizing, to physically ride in this race and look around and look down at the jockeys next to you and the horse's ears and being part of this race. And one thing that was keen to do with that was inspiring the next generation. So it's been great showing like kids what it feels like when they put this headset on with the earphones on and riding a real race. And it blows their minds. It really does put them in the rider's seat and get them excited about the sport.
That's so awesome. One of my questions actually I had written down was, is there any potential, for a VR or like a video game or something that you can reach out and have this jockey cam footage, like first person jockey horse racing video game or something like that? That would be, yeah. The VR sounds awesome.
I would love a video game. It would be amazing to have a video game when like EA Sports, does horse racing like they did with Tiger Woods golf, back in the day. And I mean, I'd love that. That would definitely get me back in gaming. But like I say, it's we're always trying to bring new technology. Maybe we can have use heart rate monitors and time, using timing, through furlongs and things like that. So there's lots of stuff that we use in other sports that can be married up with what horse racing's doing. But like you say, it's just so vast at the moment in around the world. We need to probably take it to the larger events, and then it spills out amongst the smaller events around the world.
Yeah, it would be really neat to integrate your VAR cam with the like you'll see now a lot of those big races they have where you can actually get on like the mechanical horse and ride the mechanical horse and kind of see how that feels. If you could put the VR and all that together, that would be a really, really neat experience.
Yeah, no, that is a fun experience for people to do. But like I say, if you haven't sat on a horse, it can be a bit disorientating. So I don't, I know a few people have done the VR thing where they walk the plank or something at these VR shows that you can go to, and it can be disorientating. So you do have to be quite careful with how you give this to people. But what the great thing about it is it's just we're marrying two things together. The modern day and this original extreme sport, as I like to call it, together to engage a new audience, and I think we're slowly doing that, and it's been a great experience, trying to deliver these ideas.
Yeah, and it would definitely give people a greater appreciation. We have a friend of the podcast, a regular listener, who told me that last week he took his young daughter to a merry-go-round and was riding on a horse, and said that he came off of it with a greater appreciation for jockeys, given the fact that his groin didn't feel quite the same for a couple of days. So I think whatever you can do to, and that was clearly not going 40 miles an hour, so whatever you can do to make people have a better understanding, I think it's always a good thing.
That would be a fun merry-go-round, though, if it could do 45 miles an hour.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd get on it, but it would be interesting. I definitely want to watch.
So I think while we have you here and you've given us some really nice insight into some sports documentaries and things like that, it'd be great to kind of get your opinion on some of the things. So one of the ones I wanted to ask you was, you've talked about how a lot of horse racing movies and shows aren't done very well. The one I was just thinking of that comes to mind is the recent one, Dream Horse. Have you seen that movie at all? And what did you think of that one?
Yeah, I unfortunately I've not seen it yet, because obviously it came out in the UK in some of the theatres, and obviously we haven't been able to get it to any theatres yet. And I've not seen it yet. And my criticism isn't of the filmmaker, because I know it's hard to make stuff look authentic, but I'm just saying it's just that us that are in the sport, I'm sure it's like a police officer watching, a police show, that's a dramatized, they're just like, well, that would never happen. You know what I mean? Because you've got to tell a narrative some way, shape or form. But what I'm trying to do is try and be as authentic as I can. So, when they did Seabiscuit, I thought that was really, really well done. And in fact, I thought the racing scenes were really cleverly done, because there was, if they had the technology, if they were going to do that film again, the technology that's around now would be even more, even greater to be used. I know TVG, the network here in the US, we've been working with those at Del Mar and using drone technology. We've been using it in the UK for a good few years, but it's the first time drones were kind of started to be used on the racetrack. brought a brand new perspective to people to see how the race was run from that from that view above, watching the different views of how horse racing works. But and TVG did this great thing where you could go on their app, look at the race simulcast from a normal point of view, or you could go from the drone or the jockey cam, or look at all three at the same time. So I think all of a sudden, again, it's just that technology working its way into how to tell a narrative of a race, whereas telling narratives of a story, it can certainly help. But I've been a fan of all horse racing movies. Going back to Phar Lap, which is an older one. You two guys look way too young to be remembering what Phar Lap was, but you remember the horse, but you won't remember the movie. But like I say, going forward, I'd love to make the next horse racing movie and bring a lot of that technology to the sport really, and help. Like I say earlier, putting the audience in with the where the saddle is, and give them what it really feels like to travel at 45 miles an hour and stood on 6 inches of carbon Kevlar.
No, absolutely, and obviously there's the Frankel movie due to come out at some point. Haven't heard any of the sort of news or updates
unfortunately,
about
the filming came to a halt because of COVID. Yeah. Jeremy Irons was going to be playing Henry Cecil, so I was excited by this. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, that's going to be epic. And like I say, we've just been involved with the Franco Dettori movie, which is going to be coming out in November. We've helped Trombone, which is the production company that's made the movie. Anthony Wonk is the director, who made the AP McCoy documentary as well. I'm really excited about the audiences seeing Frankie's life, because it's funny. There's some stuff in there that I was unaware of, and I'd forgotten about. You forget this guy's been in the sport for over 30 years, and he's been a shining star for us in the UK, but also even coming out here and looking at jockeys that ride here. A lot of the jockeys look up to Franco Dettori as the best in the world, and like I said, he's been selling our sport for a long time, and it's going to be interesting to see how people look at his story and his life.
Well, I guess that's as good of a point to stop as any. You've already been more than generous enough with your time, and it would be great to have you back on, because I feel like there's a number of topics we haven't touched on, and we could talk for a long time. So hopefully we can have you back on in the future. But Nathan, thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us.
No, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. I mean, I can talk about horse racing all day long, and then my second passion, which is film. So maybe we can do a top 5 sports documentaries or something like that going forward. That'd be fun talking about those. Yeah. So that'd be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah. Well, let's
Eddie would spend days talking to you about that.
Yeah, you combine.
Oh, that sounds fun, guys. But I would love to come on again, and please feel free to to reach out whenever you can. And the fall is available on Sky on Demand in the UK, and you can find it on Twitter and on Facebook, and on our links. So if you just go to Equine Productions on Twitter or Facebook, you can find it on there. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd encourage everyone to watch it.
Yeah, I was saying, have fun at the Breeders' Cup. I'm sure you're going to be busy.
Yes, no, looking forward to the Breeders' Cup. It's great that the US is opening up, and a lot of European raiders are coming over. A few Japanese raiders as well, which is great. I think that's one thing that Breeders' Cup has now brought to this world of horse racing is the big international fanfare that it is, and it's definitely the world championships of horse racing, and they do such a good job to the Breeders' Cup at getting the right the right type of competition, and I'm really looking forward to it being in Del Mar. I mean, it's a beautiful place to visit, where the surf meets the turf.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. And have a safe trip to Kentucky.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.